voice will last for the duration of this press conference. I apologize to you if it doesn't. For the last 6 months, the world economy has been on what is best described as a roller coaster. In the fall, the simmering European crisis became acute, threatening another Lehman-sized event and the end of the recovery. Strong policy measures were taken. New governments came to power in Italy and Spain. The European Union adopted a tough fiscal pact, and the European Central Bank injected badly needed liquidity. Things have quieted down since, but an uneasy calm remains. One has the feeling that at any moment things could well get very bad again. So this very much shapes our forecasts. Our baseline forecast, as you'll see in a minute, is for low growth in advanced countries, especially in Europe, but with downside risks being extremely present. Now, the baseline forecast. Our baseline is constructed on the assumption that another European flare-up will be avoided, but that uncertainty will, especially in Europe, will linger on. And it recognizes that even in this case, even in the absence of another flare-up, there are still very strong brakes to growth in advanced economies. Let me talk about those briefly. Fiscal consolidation, it is needed, it is proceeding, but it is clearly weighing on growth. Bank deleveraging, it is also needed, but it is leading, especially in Europe, not to a credit crunch, but to a tight credit. In many countries also, in particular in the United States, some households, not all, but some households are burdened with very high debt. This leads them to have low consumption, low demand. Foreclosures are weighing on housing prices and on housing investment. So how are these various breaks to growth reflected in our forecast? Let me give you a few numbers. For advanced countries as a whole, we forecast growth of 1.4% in 2012 and 2% in 2013. These are low numbers. A bit more detail. For the United States, the numbers are 2.1% for 2012 and 2.4% for 2013. Where things are worse is for the euro area, where the numbers are minus 0.3% for 2012 and 0.9% for 2013. Now, this negative number for the euro for 2012 reflects negative growth of around minus 2% in countries such as Italy and Spain, and positive growth in Germany and France, but the German and French numbers are still very low. Let me, within the baseline, turn to emerging and developing economies. Our forecasts are for continued strong growth, although somewhat lower than they have been in the past. For many countries, the challenges come mainly from the outside, in the form of lower exports to advanced countries because of the low growth there, of the volatility of commodity prices, which affects both exporters and importers, and the high volatility of capital flows, which we have seen and continue to see. Now, our forecasts for those economies reflect our belief that they'll be able to handle these challenges by using the monetary, the fiscal space that they still have, and most of them still have, and by using appropriate macroprudential tools to deal with the volatility of capital flows or any high domestic credit growth. So let me again give you a few numbers here. Our forecast for 2012 are for 8.2% for China, 6.9% for India, 3% for Brazil. These are roughly the same numbers as we gave you in January when we last met. And our forecast for Russia is 4%, which is higher than it was last January. If you turn to developing countries, for example, for sub-Saharan Africa, our forecast is for continuing strong growth based on strong commodity prices in part at 5.4%. Now, putting things together, these forecasts imply a forecast for world growth of 3.5% for 2012, improving to 4.1% for 2013. You may want to ask, how does this relate to our forecast as of last January and of last September? It's about 0.2% higher than our forecast in January, and about 0.5% lower than they were in September. Now, let me turn to the risks. So, geopolitical tension affecting the oil market is surely a risk. But the main risk remains that of another acute crisis in Europe. The building of the so-called firewalls, when it is completed, will represent major progress. But by themselves, firewalls cannot solve the difficult fiscal, competitiveness, and growth issues that some of the European countries face. Bad news on the macroeconomic front, on the political front, still carries the risk of triggering the type of dynamics that we saw last fall. This takes me to the last part of my introductory remarks, which is the implications for policy. So, first about the baseline and whether growth under the baseline can be made stronger. So many, or even most of the policy debates here center around how best to balance the adverse short-run effects of fiscal consolidation or bank deleveraging against their favorable effects in the long